Alrighty. Okay, so you probably noticed there's some cameras have been appearing. This is for a different project, so it's capturing video footage of myself. We want to try and get a demo on camera at some point today if possible. So if you do come on down, just be aware that you're going to be famous basically. Now, when considering depression, the neurobiological basis of the depression is important consideration. Now, I know it sounds like, hang on, Austin's contradicting himself. He says you should pay attention to the metaphor, it's not a chemical imbalance. Well, there's another way of looking at this. What is depressed? When a person has cognitive retardation, they can't concentrate, they've lost time coordination, so they're in this eternal, perpetual now that seems to last forever. And anyone who's been severely depressed will know what I'm talking about there. The day of suffering seems to last an eternity, and then tomorrow you're going to do it all again after the world's longest night again. Now, when we get those kind of symptoms, weeping without relief, the inability to make decisions, irritability, sensitive to loud noises, you can't cope with people, you mix your words, you lose nouns, you think you're going demented because you can't remember anything's name, both people's names and things' names. We lose nouns. That's your frontal lobes. That's a frontal lobe depression. And if it's a frontal lobe depression, that means we have an unactivity, a lowered activity in the frontal lobes. So our intervention must be designed to stimulate activity in the frontal lobes. I know it's a simple thing, and it's a very obvious thing, but it's not something people do. They go into their stock cures that they do with everybody. The person who's got serious cognitive retardation, they're not moving around very much. They're in this perpetual altered state of consciousness. They just feel dreadful. They can't really function. You ask them a question, and they sit there staring at you, trying to reason and understand. They just do this. Well, they've got a much more generalized depression. So more of the brain is involved with this. Basically, different parts, different lobes of the brain can be depressed. And our interventions need to deal with those areas of depression according to the way it's being structured both neurologically but also experientially. So we have metaphors of movement, which is, for me, one of the ideal ways. It's not the only way, but it's an ideal way for dealing with the experiential aspect, particularly when people are stuck and need to get moving forwards. But we also have to start looking at the neurobiological basis and start getting people to do things that stimulate those frontal lobes. Now, what I could start to do is tell you all the different functions of the lobes. I could start to try and remember all of my neuroscience training and education and remember the textbooks, which of course now, because of the new scanners, completely contradict everything that I was taught all those years ago. Or you could start looking at neuroscience. One of those areas that people go, I don't even know where to start, it's too complicated. It is complicated. But there are some superb texts that you can look at, various journals and magazines, to start learning neuroanatomy and the different functions. I just want to give you one of my favorite little tricks. For those that have been in the blackest of black depressions, where the whole world is just black, your inner world is just, you're lost in time, you can't decide anything, you can't visualize anything. One of the things we know is that there's certain neurotransmitters involved with that. And those kind of problems are actually very common with alcohol, because it seems to affect the GABA neurotransmitter. G-A-B-A, it stands for something complicated, which I'm not going to try and pronounce. Look it up, G-A-B-A, GABA. Now, if you lower GABA levels, your pictures go black and white. There's a weird thing. And they start to go dark. So how do you restore that? How do you start getting the brain bright again? How do you start putting colour back into people's experience? Well, I was quite lucky in that in my 20s I had the perfect first-hand opportunity to try this after a complete mental breakdown that I had myself. I was already studying the subject, and then work got too much and life got too much and I just wasn't dealing with things properly. and all sorts of maladaptive coping strategies, and oh, it wasn't good. Now, in coming out of that, for which for me medication was a useful thing and all the other NLP stuff and hypnosis, I still recognized that my inner world wasn't very bright. I had dulled tremendously. So I started getting bright cardboard. You used to get it in the children's section of a craft shop. The luminescent card, you get it in all those different fluorescent colors. And I would stick them in high places around the house. As I got familiar with where they were, I could now close my eyes and think about the bits of paper that are in the other room and try and remember which color is up there and which color is up there. Think about what you have to do that. You have to start making pictures of the colors, and they're bright luminescent, and they're also up because different lobes of the brain have different visual fields. Up, temporal lobes. Down, occipital lobes. Different visual fields are processed differently. So I can start to really get into stimulating the temporals, which are also involved in religious experience. It's funny how religious stuff tends to be up. And I can start putting bright colours in there. I could put them down as well if I wanted to. That's going to stimulate a different area, and so on. Simple little tricks. Other stuff. Supposing it's a left hemisphere that's a little bit more depressed than the right hemisphere. What if we go and look at what the left hemisphere responds to and start to prescribe those as homework activities? Those activities. Get them to do those things. What if it's the right hemisphere? And I know I had a right hemispheric depression for a lot of time. So that was really easy. I know my neuroscience, I knew it back then. So I needed to get creative. I needed to do art. I needed to do creative stuff. I bought clay. I bought a children's potter's wheel. I had one as a child and I went and got another one. I found one in a charity shop. And I bought one of those and I started making, it was terrible. It was awful what I made. It didn't matter. I was doing creative stuff as well as the other stuff. So we can start to prescribe behaviors and activities that match the neurological functions that are in deficit. It's just a thought. So one of the big problems about depression is the fact that it's a very dangerous problem to have. Now, medically, we see it as a disorder. It's a chemical imbalance of the brain. It has genetic dispositions. It's a medical disorder, a medical problem that needs to be treated medically. And that's been the prevailing narrative of depression for many years. We know that there's all sorts of studies around suicide and depression, and there's a very strong concordance between these two things. But not everyone that is depressed, or even suicidally depressed, even looks it. So we're familiar with the news stories of the parents or the family of the young suicide casualty. And they will say things like, he was always such a bright boy, he was always so happy. He was popular with his friends, he was doing well at school, he didn't seem to have a care in the world, and now he's dead. And the problem with this is that either people aren't noticing when a person's depressed, or depressed people don't always behave like they're depressed. After years of depression and self-abuse and alcohol and insomnia and not really eating properly and all the consequences of depression, people can start to take on an appearance that is slightly concerning. But in the early stages, where the person is still motivated and still have things going on, the depression may be hidden. One of the things I've often said is that if you're good looking and have nice skin, it's very difficult to be taken seriously by doctors or by anybody in the mental health profession if you have a serious emotional problem, because you don't look ill, you don't look crazy enough. And only when we start to look how we're reporting ourselves to feel do people take us seriously. Now, what I've tried to do with metaphors of movement and the model that we're going to be looking at, and of which in this video there's going to be a short section of, is to create a scenario where we're able to hear what is actually being communicated rather than what we are taught to listen to and what we've been taught to hear. Because what a person says and what we hear the person say don't always line up. And so often a person is communicating actually very clearly, even if they're not aware of it, what the problem is, what help they need, and the quality of their suffering. but everyone dismisses that communication. The most common form of communication that gets dismissed is idiomatic communication, and this is something I pay very close attention to. Idioms are those expressions or phrases like I feel stuck, I'm on an uphill struggle, I feel like something holds me back, I'm trapped, that reveals an awful lot of data and information about the person's experience, but they themselves might dismiss it when we draw attention to it. So when we say, okay, so you feel trapped, trapped like what? The person may well go, well, I'm just best a bit depressed at the moment, and they dismiss the concept of trapped. It's there, and then it gets dismissed. Because that's what they've learned to do. That's what other people have done. That's culturally, we do these things. We dismiss people's idiomatic communications, or we impose our own understanding. So the example that I often use is the guy that's in the pit of despair. I'm in the pit of despair. I'm down. I'm trapped. I'm at the bottom. I can't move forwards. I'm not going anywhere. I've got no which way to turn. There's no way out. But that guy goes to see the doctor, and the doctor ignores that and goes, well, that's symptomatic communication of depression, therefore you have a chemical imbalance, therefore you need drugs, or whatever. So we're hearing there's a problem and diagnosing depression, but diagnosing the wrong thing, because he's not depressed with a chemical imbalance. That's the doctor's interpretation. He's depressed being in a pit of despair. So the interventions that we create must fit the structure of the problem, not ignore the structure of the problem and give our blanket cure that everyone with that diagnosis receives. And this is a very unusual way of working therapeutically, because what we're doing is tailoring our communication to match the operating metaphor, or what I call the primary operating metaphor, that the client has. So we are tailoring specifically to that. Now, in the demonstration you're going to see, I know what I'm doing is received by the brain, the mind, the emotional set of the client with great effect. Unless I'm talking your language, it might sound that I'm talking rubbish, that there's nothing there because, well, what's he talking about? He's not talking science or biology or chemicals or active cures. It just sounds like he's saying a load of idioms. I am. But those idioms are sequenced according to the metaphors of movement model, specifically to the client's experience. And that's why it has the effect it has. I'm not dismissing their model of experience and then simply imposing something new, something different, whatever it is that's my therapeutic preference. So with a depressed guy, for example, supposing what he does is he drinks alcohol, right, to cope with his being in the pit of despair. Imagine we're walking down a strange road and we find this guy in the pit of despair. So I'm engineering a story. Imagine we are walking down a strange road and we find a guy in the pit of despair. So it's no longer him, it's a guy. But it's all right, because we've seen this before. Don't worry, we say. You have to shout a bit, he's a long way down. Don't you worry, just go forwards, forwards. And when he hits the wall, we'll give him some whiskey. Would that be a good idea? That's it. So we elicit the coping behavior and then we apply it to the metaphor. Supposing it's this. How do you deal with being up to here in other people's shit? Well, I meditate. Imagine we're walking down a strange road. It's a busy place. There's some guy in the pit of despair. Ignore him. He's drunk. And we find this poor woman. It's a disgusting situation. She's up to here in other people's shit. It's all right, though. Don't you worry. We know what. Don't you worry, love. We know exactly what to do. All you've got to do is meditate. Would that be good advice? So we apply the coping behavior to the metaphor and then go back to the client and go, would that be good advice? Sometimes they say yes, to which I will go, you're an idiot, if you think that's true, but most of the time they don't. So let's do a demonstration of the whole process. We have our willing volunteer. Oh yes, everyone gets out alive, you'll be fine. Okay. I'm hoping you've got problems.
Yes.
You look like you do, so...
Yeah.
Just,
No. Plenty.
right, so... The reason that you volunteered, the reason we're about to have this conversation, what's that like? The whole thing.
It's like everything I need is not there for me.
Yeah, okay, that's the symptoms. You were here this morning, right?
Yeah.
What's it like?
What's it like? It's like everything I need is in view but out of reach.
I'm sorry, what?
Everything I need is in view but out of reach.
Everything you need is in view, but what's to your left?
What's to my left?
So you're straight in there, okay? As soon as you've got an element of the menopause, you get straight in there. What's to the left?
There's a depth.
What?
A depth.
A depth?
Addis.
Oh, God. How big? And how close? Just give me some idea.
It's very close,
Yeah.
but it's not so broad. So it could be bridged.
Yes, we've got...
It's just
What's to the
scary.
right?
Rocks.
Rocks. Big rocks, little rocks, lots of rocks.
A pile of rocks.
Okay, 5 rocks. What's in front?
Narrow road.
Oh. What's behind?
Wall.
A wall?
Yeah, a wall.
How close?
Supporting my back.
Oh, how lovely. Very kind of that wall. What are you standing on?
On the narrow road.
And what's up?
The universe.
The universe? That's a lot. It's pretty big, that.
Yeah.
Thank you. You don't need your eyes, by the way. So it's like that.
Yeah.
So you're on the road, and you've got some support.
Yeah.
But in order to move forwards, you'd have to give up the support.
Yeah.
It would be very difficult for you to explore what's left without throwing yourself into the unknown. And there's a lot to overcome that's right for you. I mean, basically, when it comes to what's right, things are piling up. So effectively, because of the support that you have and accept, you're at a standstill.
Yeah.
Despite there being a clear road ahead for you, and that would be very straightforward.
Yes.
Because to move forward in life, I hate to point this out to you, I'm sorry, but you'd be doing this alone.
Yeah.
Giving up the support that's in the background for you. Now, you have support in the background, but you don't know what's actually behind that,
Yes.
or the reasons for it. But you know it's got your back.
Yeah.
And that would be a difficult thing to give up, I'd imagine.
Yes.
And as you move forward, it will put distance between you and the supporting mechanism that you've had all this time.
Yes.
Yeah. I know, because you've told me. How am I doing so far?
Very good.
Oh, thank you. You'd like to hear it. I've got to say that I look at this and I've got to say there's things about this that bother me. I wouldn't say this myself, but you could understand how some people would suggest a situation like this allows you to ignore what's in the background and never actually face up to the past. The support that you receive prevents you from seeing what's going on behind your back and everything that's gone on until this moment. Now, what I do know, of course, is the results of this is you don't get what you want.
Yeah.
Because what you look forward to, you can't go to. It's almost like you need the wall as much as the wall needs you. Now, I look at this and I go, who is that person? I've got to say, I haven't got a clue. The reason I don't really know is because wherever I stand, I can only see part of it. because there's certain sides to her that are hidden from everybody else. And you know what I'm saying then. Now we know she's an upstanding individual, but she can only be upstanding if she has that support in the background. Now how do you deal with this in real life? What do you do?
I straighten my back and
So imagine we're walking down a strange road.
Yeah.
As we walk down a strange road, we find an unusual scene. It's a lovely road, a bit of rocks, a bit of an abyss. So there's a woman standing right by the fucking abyss.
Yeah.
It's all right. We've seen this before. We know what to do. Don't you worry. What I would, the abyss, scary shit. All you've got to do is straighten your back. Stand up tall. Be proud. Good advice.
No.
No, it'd be crazy advice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
What might be better advice we could give this poor unfortunate soul?
Start walking away from the rabbits.
Update to the advice, love. Start walking. Problem with that though, isn't there? Where the fuck's she going to go?
Down a narrow road.
It's a narrow road, love. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Any questions? That's it.
That's it.
That's it. That's all there is. There's no conclusion. There's no happy ending. There's no tapping your face, making the feelings change, swishing it, circles of excellence. None of that. You stop. And when you stop, you stop. Done. No conclusions. Annoying, isn't it? But what's happened to you? Or what is happening to you?
Yeah. What is happening is that I've got a feeling that there's options. I'm not stuck in the... well, there's a feeling that I can move forward.
Mm. We can. But if you will, it's a whole different matter, of course, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh. Easy, right? So I don't need a conclusion. Because it's not my life to live. They're not my decisions to make. Simply making someone feel better about their shitty life, you haven't done them any favours. Simply showing someone opportunity, you may ruin their life. Picture the following scene. I have a pet rat. I don't anymore. I used to have rats. I used to train them up and do stuff. Rats are fantastic pets. Mine used to sleep in their cage, but the lid was always open. They were free to do what they liked in the house. I had 2 rats before I got the first dog. And when we got the dog, the rats went, "That is the best present you've ever given us." And they mothered the dog. And he just thought it was fantastic. After they died and got 2 more, they were biters. So poor Reggie, thinking these 2 will be lovely friends. No, every time he goes near them. Imagine they didn't live with me, and they've been born into a cage, and they live a year in the cage. And then one day I let them out, and they can see the greater world, and then they go back in the cage for the rest of their life. Is that a good thing? Now, this thing that you can be anything in the world, you can be anything that you want to be, you can have the life that you want, you can be anything you want, is absolute crock of shit. Absolutely nonsense. And yet this is what the personal development industry sells people. This concept that you can always do better. By encouraging you to do more, I can make you feel inadequate. And if I can make you feel inadequate, I can sell you the solution. Okay, that's how it works. It's simple, standard marketing. Now, unfortunately, that person's life is not your life. So the availability, the options available to you may not be available to anybody else, and vice versa. So it's foolish to try and solve another person's problem. Because you're only solving it from your position. You're not living their life. You cannot possibly know that's going to work. But doing this and cutting short, she's now going to be thinking about this in ways she's never thought about before. Because all of this information was outside of her conscious awareness. Now she's fully conscious of it. I don't define mental health by how happy a person is. The World Health Organization defines mental health as a state of well-being. And then they've got some sub-clauses on that. I entirely disagree with the World Health Organization. Interestingly, I was asked to do, I did a presentation for them, a workshop for them a number of years ago over in the States. And nearly everyone in the room disagreed with the central tenet of mental health definition. I can be having a really bad time. I can be suffering a lot and be really depressed about it. That doesn't define me as being mentally unhealthy. That defines me as somebody who's having a difficult time. I believe mental health is defined by the accuracy by which you assess your situation in life. And culture and language encourages us to deny our experience. We deny our identities. We deny everything about our experience to make it fit the social expectations that appear to be communicated to us. And therefore we go through life with the symptoms breaking through. We know something's wrong, but we don't understand what to do about it. And we try and fix it according to this cultural narrative of how we fix problems that are currently fashionable. It was fashionable to do psychoanalysis, then it was fashionable to do Jungian work, then it was fashionable to do dream work, psychics were fashionable. Tapping was ridiculously fashionable back in the 90s. NLP was really fashionable, and then it became the 3 Ps, the 3 principles. There was transactional analysis. Where did that go? Go to South India. They are transactional analysis crazy. Everyone's doing transactional analysis. The big thing in India. The biggest thing I've ever seen anywhere. They're obsessed. But that will pass. It'll be replaced by something else. It's just the fashion. But each time that people do this, they don't realize they're just conforming to these cultural ideals, and they're not actually, they're just further dismissing their experience. This connects the person to their experience. Now she can start thinking what to do about it. Don't need me for that. Happy to do so, but I'm expensive. Any questions? Any questions about what I did here? Did you follow the sequence? Because that's what you're now going to do. What I want you to do, and thank you for that. You can. Unless you want to sit there, you can stay there if you want to. Essentially, it's doing this next part. You're going to elicit the coping behavior in real life. What do you do in real life to deal with this situation? And then you're going to apply it to the metaphor by creating the story. Imagine we're walking down a strange road and we find. And all you then do is describe whatever it is that's their metaphor. And it's okay because we know what to do. We've seen this before. We're experts. All you need to do is, and make it ridiculous. It needs to sound as ridiculous as it is. I believe this tiny little piece of work is the single most, I think, it's the biggest breakthrough I've ever made in terms of therapeutic change work. Because people, you know, the resistant client phenomena, the polarity responder, the yes buts, the what if, what you need to know about my problem is this. No, you're not listening to me, you don't understand. Those behaviors are largely driven because you as the coach or therapist are not accepting their attempted solution. Let's go back to the story I told. I look at this guy and he's clearly depressed and I say, what's the problem? And he says, I'm depressed. I say, what's really the problem? And he says, I'm really depressed. And I say, what's that like? And he said, it's like I'm in the pit of despair. And I say, what do you want from me? And he says, I want you to help me move my life forwards. The pit of despair is not the problem. The inability to move forwards is why he's come. He can't get moving forwards to work. So he's going to travel for 6 hours across country and pay £125 to me to see if I can get moving forwards to work. In that situation, will moving forwards help him? It won't. It won't help him. But that's what he wants, and that's what he's buying. He's buying into his attempted solution that cannot work. Every single problem that we're eliciting with this process has the same structure built into it. You have an attempted solution that you've been trying all this time, and it doesn't work. You've gone to this course, that course, read this book, listened to this audio program, this CD, you've done this meditation, you've taken those drugs, and none of them got the strategy that doesn't work to work for one simple reason. it doesn't work. Now, what we have to do is get the person in a position whereby they are willing to abandon the thing that doesn't work. For some of them, it's like losing their religion. They've spent so many years making this godforsaken mistake, they've invested a lot in it, they're not going to quit it just because you tell them it doesn't work. So you get them to tell you it doesn't work. By saying, imagine we're going down a strange road and we find a person who, and we tell them to do such and such, would that be good advice? And they go, no. Bingo. They are now ready to accept an alternative strategy by which to deal with the problem. And if you miss that step out, the session can appear to be going really, really well, but now what you end up with is a client that goes, yes, but, because they know the solution is to move forwards. And if you're not using those kind of languages, they will start being resistant to you. Does that make sense? So, what we're doing here is getting the person ready to accept a new behaviour. It's not a case of changing the pit. It's a case of changing moving forwards, because moving forwards won't work. So, any questions before you do this exercise? Or any observations or thoughts?